Hello, colleagues. I'm here as your CPC chair, Scott Falstrom, to show you how to go about updating templates for the Common Course numbering with AB 1111. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and this should allow you to kind of see uh, everything we've got. So this is going to be linked to the document, the Google Doc that says modifying a course for CCN. If you click that top link, it will open up this site, which is going to show all of the different templates that are currently available. As you can see, phase 1 at the top, phase 2 right here, and this is only phase 2, part A. You can see the standard templates, embedded support, and honors are all listed for everything that's there. Please make sure you fill out one submission for each one of the courses that still exists. If you have a full honors section, it's going to remain with the H designation. Then make sure that you do both the standard for your course, your parent course, and the H for your honors. I'm going to go ahead and pick the statistics stat C1000, and it opens up here. My recommendation is to download this and have it open in another tab. And what that's going to do for me is allow me to log into CurriQunet here. And this will let me start by creating my proposal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating my proposal. So I'm going to create math. Oops. Select proposal type. I want to modify a credit course. Please make sure that you modify, do not create a new. Click next. Find proposal. In the subject filter, you can just type math or whatever your subject code is. And my keyword search, I'm going to put in math 150. I would do math 103, but it's already in the system, so I can't do another one while that's in place. So I'll search for math 150, and this one should allow me to do this. Click on it to select and choose select proposal, and then click next when you're ready to go. Make sure it matches up there. It is. I'll click create proposal. So what we're going to do is we're going to, in a sense, show you what we would do if this was the Math 103 and how would I update it to be this new template. This takes a moment. While I'm doing that, I'm going to open up kind of in half my screen. So I'm going to share screen a little bit here, and I'll have my template that the state has provided for me here on the right-hand side, and I've got my course piece on the left-hand side. So now this allows me, let me zoom back just a little bit. There we go, so we can see everything. And I will turn on my little Q bar here to kind of also, I believe, help show you where I'm at. So as we go forward, remember, everything in here, you have to kind of make sure matches exactly. We start off at the top, move down. First page is the cover page. So this is Department Math Division. The thing we can change is the subject designator. It says right here, the subject is statistics. The subject code is STAT. So I would go down and choose STAT. Make sure I pick that one. Course number, it tells me, is C1000. I can simply copy and paste. If you get used to it, a little Control C, Control V if you're on the Mac, PCs. If you're on the Mac, I think it's Command C, Command V. So it's very quick. Let's see here. What else do I have? Course title. It says here, Introduction to Statistics. So I'm going to copy that, paste it directly over the titles that are in there. And then under formerly, this is where you want to be careful. It should list the entire change that we used to have. So the subject designator, the course number, and the title. So for me, that would be Math 103 colon statistics. That's the full name of the course previously. Now it's going to be called Intro to Statistics, and Math 103 was my former subject designator and course number. Under the rationale box, I could just highlight and say updating to CCN template. Okay, if you're making any other changes, I'd recommend you don't. Just get the template in. We can deal with the rest of it later, unless there's something that is absolutely critical. We don't want to be putting ourselves under the spotlight too much. Okay. And let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off so that we can kind of cover the rest of the screen as well. Sorry about that, in case it looked like I was covering too much of your screen. So here, I'm done with this. Let's move on to the next box. Course status. Course status is one where you have to do something, and it is pretty important. What we will have to do is make sure we click this right here that says Common Course Number. So we have to click that box. I'm going to delete the other drawing here, and down at the bottom, if I scroll down, I'm going to click Save. There really shouldn't be anything else that you're changing. Click Save and move on with your day. Okay. Now what that does is it automatically gets all of the part one and part twos loaded so that it's much easier for you. Basically, a lot of the work's going to be done. You're going to do a lot of copying and pasting. Okay. Next up, there should be no changes to duplication, course hours and schedule. This is where I got to go back to my template on the right-hand side, scroll down and see, did they tell me about the hours right here? Minimum unit threshold. So the units, I have to choose 3 semester units. That's the minimum. Our course, at least this one, was 5, so we can leave it as 5. Or again, in this case, if it was stats, I could change that to be 4 because just to match the actual stats class that we have, show you what that looks like. Nothing else should change. I'll click save and I'll move down to my next course. There's no materials fee. There's no concurrent scheduling, so I'm not changing any of these pieces. I'm not changing them. When I get down to my first piece here with course description, I see, ooh, I have a launch requirement and a catalog description. So I need to come in here and find my catalog description, and I need it to be identical. So I'm going to copy here, and I'm just going to paste that over there and make sure I got all of it. Ooh, last little bit down here, I'll copy that. Again, copying from a PDF, not ideal, but that's what they provided for us. There's the entire catalog description. Okay, now that is part one catalog description. So we can also have our part one, our catalog description, which would be kind of part two, is going to be sitting right below it. When I come down and scroll a little bit further, I'll get to the lecture outline. Simply scroll down until I get to course content. Let me drag this down a little bit here. Aha, here it is, course content. And it says, here's all the required topics. Awesome. So what am I going to do? I'm going to grab all of this, copy. I'm going to paste it over into the box, and notice it kept the thing that said part one required. So just delete that and leave everything else right here for us. And I'll just clean up a little bit with the spacing just so that it looks nice. Again, I'm copying it with some formatting that may not always match up perfect. There we go. There's everything. Next up, here's the lecture outline from our current course outline. I leave it. I leave it here unless I've discussed this with the articulation officer and there's a viable reason why I should be removing or changing anything. This part two has given us articulation. We do not want to lose articulation. Please do not make changes without consulting the articulation officer. Again, this is mainly a copy and paste activity. That's why we have advanced degrees. Let's move on to laboratory activities. There may be a lab portion. If so, make sure you copy the content portion for the lab. In this case, there's nothing for mine, so I will say not applicable. There we go. Come down to the bottom, click Save. I'm now done with the content. I'm really done with about 2/3 of it at this point. I click on Performance Objectives, and this is where I scroll down to see where it says they call them course objectives here, identical and required. So what do? I simply copy all of these, copy, put them in the box, hit paste. Spacing's off a little bit, so just a couple little, bring everything up so it's on one line, and there goes that. All right, there we go. Notice part one is identical and required. Part two is what we had locally agreed to, and these are sometimes required to maintain articulation. So I'm going to leave them because I'm not going to touch those unless the AO has said we need to. Okay. There will be no changes to assignments. Assignments are not part of the template. No changes to methods of instruction. Again, not part of the template. But if I click on methods of evaluation, that has a part one box. I come back to my template. I find methods of evaluation. I simply highlight all of it, copy, paste. I'm now done with that one. I'll click save. There you go. Moving on to the next piece, textbooks. Okay, so now this one, I'm not going to lie, this one might take a little bit longer because if you do not have the textbooks listed here as actual printed textbooks, then you will need to add a new record for each one. Click that, put the author, the title, the edition, the publisher, year, ISBN, and determine if that's the most recent edition. So for me, that would be the Peck book. I would add that in and put all that information in. If you haven't done that, I'll show you how to add a record. Make sure that their texts that are listed here are in our list of textbooks. So add a record, author, Roxy Peck, title, statistics, learning from, from data. Edition third, publisher is Cengage, year 2024, ISBN. So I'm using the ISBN that's listed here in the link. So 978-035-775. 8298. There we go. Is this the most current? Yes, that is 2024. That'd be it. And I click insert. Now that book shows up in here, and I would do that for any of the other books as well. So the next one below is one that I would add. I'm not going to show that in the video because it's simply clicking new record and adding it. When you get to OER materials, so there are, in this case, I have a $0 link for our Dana Center materials at the bottom. I have a $0 link for OpenStax with Barbara Ilowski, and I have another $0 link at the top. So those go underneath in the bottom. When we say you can add a new record, I'll click add a new record. I'll simply copy these one at a time. And I think I grabbed a little bit of the Peck piece, so I'll just make sure I delete that. There we go. Click insert, one per line. Next one up, I add a new record. I come down to the next one. Thank you so much, Barbara. And copy this one and paste it down here. There we go. There's everything we need. Insert, and I've got another one. I do that for each of the OER texts, one per line as you go. Once you've done all of these are all the ones that are required. You do not have to remove any that you already had. You just have to make sure the ones that are here must be included. Next up, enrollments. Nothing here should change. Registration. This one is the requisite limitations. This one you have to make sure matches with the requisites and prerequisites, co-requisites, everything that's listed here. Notice it says placement determined by this. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, I've got to have a new one. So I have to add an item. I don't see that exactly listed. I click add an item. This is listed on the template as a prerequisite. I say prerequisite. This is a non-course requirement, so I paste it. There's no conditions on it. My reason is it's a following statute. Thank you. AB 1111 is telling me to put that in there, right? Turn off brain, copy, paste. That's apparently what curriculum is. Click save. Next up, go to any other prerequisites that you had. This must be identical. If I'm going to choose the common course numbering course, I have to make them identical. So I need to delete every one of these other potential prerequisites that I may have had. Am I sure I want to delete this item? Yes. And I will just move through these pieces, making sure that I keep the prerequisite that came from AB 1111, common course numbering, and it's right here. So that's listed. Nothing else on there, nothing else to save. Next up, there should be no changes to the library, should be no changes to the SLOs, should be no changes to the distance ed. You might want to at least check it. Remember, up to 100% means you can do 100% or anything less than that. If it says 100% online or hybrid, that's the one that does any then percentage less than that. If you did choose hybrid only, then you could not offer 100% online, even in case of an emergency. There will be no honors for this. If this was the honors course, there might be something to add there, but again, it's already there. Everything should be already created. Then no changes here to the general education status, no change to articulation, codes and dates. Shouldn't have any other code contributors, and you're done. Click launch. Are you sure you want to launch? Yeah, I'm sure I want to launch. So I just launched it. It's now into stage 2. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, turn my camera back on. And folks, that's it. It's an exercise in pressing a few buttons, copying and pasting material that came from that group at the state level from ASCCC. We simply take the template, copy and paste it into part 1, leave our part 2s, change all our numbering, and move forward. That's how you do it. If you have questions, please let me know, and I'll be there to support you even during the summer if you need it. So have a great rest of your day. Off you go.